So the nice thing about constellation manipulatives is a lot of times with especially younger learners, they see a constellation and they think, oh, it's essentially a flat surface. Because when they come into the dome, they see the dome is all essentially one distance. So they have a little bit of a cognitive disconnect on looking at the stars, especially when we're then going in and adding the let's fly around Orion. There's a bit of a, well, wait a second, that's too much. I need to take it a little slower, or they're still in the concrete learner phase where they want to be able to grab it. So a few years ago, I started making a few constellation manipulatives. And I made them out of glass, which was kind of risky, especially with middle schoolers. Okay, it was really risky. Had to deburr edges, seal edges, get everything sorted out, but a little bit of a business plug here. If you're looking to get a lot of glass that's all essentially the same size, Target. They have the mosaic pictures that have places for essentially 6 to 9 identical pictures. It was a pretty reasonable price, so I picked one of those up and just salvaged the glass. I've been working on ways to make it a little bit friendlier and not quite as drop it and a week's worth of work explodes. And I went into building a model that can be viewed from different sizes or different directions so that you're able to see apparent distance. So it all goes back to layering the glass by dealing with glass. And then I started thinking about stuff that schools and teachers may have access to, or planetarians that have access to the back storage room, because you know where that's the good air conditioner is there that hooks to the planetarium that keeps it cool. Sometimes you're able to get in there and find the magic thing of 8.5 by 11 transparency films. With the development and proliferation of the use of video projectors in the classroom, a lot of times schools purchase several hundred packs of these and they just go live in the storeroom in the back of the building. So I found a way of using those as a bit of technology, or using those as a little bit of the building material. The other materials you need, ultrafine Sharpie, and I just took a cardboard moving box and sliced it into nice little 1/2-inch strips. You can use a rotary cutter or a box knife, safety first. Watch your fingers, you only got 10. Then transparent tape and packing tape. Now for the transparent tape, just Joe tape works fine. I did find with the packing tape, after experimentation, colored packing tape actually works better than the transparent. You'd think being able to look in through the side through the cardboard would be useful. However, what I found out was the transparent picks up your fingerprints really, really easy, and the oils on your hand, and then suddenly you have a rather messy looking product. Procedure, select a constellation. Now, I went to the IAU's Constellation Public Images database and selected a picture of Ursa Major. Download the constellation map. Then went over to Sinbad and downloaded the Bright Star List. And of course, I did a little side check over into Wikipedia just to double check the numbers to see the bright stars with their distances. I sorted the list from closest to furthest away. Notice I went all the way, we're out to 400 light years. And I wanted to group them together. So the ones that are furthest away are going to be the first layer of plastic I deal with. And for that, I number over on the side my layers. So like all my 400s are going to be one section. The 200s are going to be together also on my second sheet. Then I start getting a little shorter distances, like 150 to 200 is going to be the third sheet, 125 to 150, so on and so forth until I get to the closest layers. Now, after a while, you notice I went to almost intervals of about 20 light years. That made it a lot easier. And yes, Krista, I love the idea of using transparency film for to help make face shields. That is very useful. The only issue I found out is if you have blue filter on your glasses and you put the transparency sheet very, very close, you're going to get a very interesting moire pattern occurring because the transparency film is not a perfect color match. Just discovered that one by mistake and was like, oh, what's causing, am I getting auras? Do I have a migraine coming on? And no, it was the face shield. But that's my only warning on that. But Krista, very good idea. So here is one of the sheets. Sheet number 1, I've tagged with my Sharpie the locations of the stars. Yes, I did use a little branding here over on the side, just so you know I didn't. This is on their public site, so you can download these if you want to make them on your own. I label the layer up in the corner. So during the construction phase, I know that it's able to be oriented the same direction because I'm not including the lines. These are just the points of light. Continue all the way up to layer 9. Now, you don't layer on top every single time. You want to do each layer, and then I did a just like last minute check, and you can see that I had a little bit of a drift going on. There was a little bit of a drift, but is this scientifically accurate, or is this a good representation for the students to be able to play with? Next comes the fun part, assembly. And you actually make frames first. An initial frame of your cardboard sticks that you have cut to length to match the half sheet of construction paper or transparency paper. And I gave it the orientation and number, again, just for my own sanity. Because as I start building, I'm going to be securing our shapes and our films to the squares. So align it and tape it down on the sides without directly making contact. So I've taped it and then prepared on the alternate side so that I can lay my next 2 sheets or my next 2 strips on and just start layering up. So here's an example. I aligned my layer 7 with frame 7, taped it on the sides, and I put my prep tape on the top and the bottom of the alternate side because if you look at how the frame is laid out, my next sheet of construction paper on that strip is going at the bottom and the top. The one thing I found with using sheet protectors is it's a much finer weight plastic and it tends to shred a little bit. If you get the sheet protectors that are like this very expensive high ones that are used for archival, the mils for the plastic is a little bit higher, so it's less likely to stretch and tear. Transparency I found is pretty much the best of the thin materials. This doesn't mean I'm going to stop experimenting because I think this is actually kind of a fun thing. And my sister, I sent this to her as kind of like, okay, you work in public relations. This is not something that a public relations person normally does. Do you want to try this? And she was like, sure, I'll give this a whirl. She gave me feedback on how to make this a little bit easier because she was like, okay, you're crafty. I'm not. And so one of the areas that she did suggest was with the alternating to put the tape on before you put the cardstock. Laminating pages. Laminating pages, you could use, but they aren't as visually transparent. So you have to kind of keep an eye on that. They improve their transparency once heated. Once you have all the layers together, you can just take your packing tape and stretch it across the edges just to give it a nice finish. And this one has 9 layers in it, and you can still see the wood grain of the table underneath it, which is pretty good. Would I put it as high readability? No. But it does turn into kind of a neat interactive. So we will try and use the magic of the YouTube. So I set this on top of my iPad with just a white screen shown, and then moved my camera around it. Because during dress rehearsal for the WAC, thank you, Michelle, we discovered that this is way too reflective to show on live camera. It does a really good job of just being a mirror of, oh, there's a deer running outside Jack's house. So we pre-filmed the manipulative phase, and I'll run it one more time because we have a few seconds time-wise. So again, looking straight on, it looks like the constellation of Ursa Major. But then as you tilt down or you look at it from different angles, then you really start to see the different views and seeing that some of the stars are visually much further back than the ones that are near. Yes, transparency film, especially with the ones on Amazon, they turn out really cool. But the thing I did discover with the ones you sometimes pick up on the cheap with Amazon is they are a thinner weight. And I did try some different colors. Prototype number 2, I went through and I have a 3mm hole punch because, you know, most teachers have a 3mm hole punch stashed away somewhere. And so I went and took some of my glitter stars and used the 3mm punch to punch out some little dots of different colors. And what I found was that there was a bit of color shift because of the transparency not being a true clear, but actually having these microscopic lines from the extruding process, that the moire effect sometimes shifted the color. So it kind of grayed everything out, especially as it got deeper in. So if you had a really impressive red star, but it was far away, it would still look, it would turn this awkward gray, muddy it up a little bit. But yes, I would love to try it with some different materials. And like I said, I'm still going to keep experimenting because glass was really cool because it had the internal refraction that kind of amplified the depth. And I'm still kind of working on something to try another direction. And yes, very weird and interesting is pretty much my wheelhouse. So back to you. Thanks again, Michelle. And if you have any questions, send me some messages.